Welcome to another episode of Mr. Plumb's Thoughts. Today I wanted to talk about patterns. Patterns are what I focus on in my historical studies, and once you can recognize patterns, it's pretty cool. I think let's start with what is a pattern. If you ever watch anyone sew, they start with a pattern, a paper template with all the instructions necessary. It tells them all the right curves, all the right measurements, and everything they need to do from beginning to end to create that, whatever product they're trying to make. So the sewer lays that pattern then over the fabric, cuts along the lines, pins pieces, follows the steps, and at the end they have a product. Now, here's the key with patterns. They can use any fabric they want. Even if the pattern calls for a specific fabric, they can still use whatever they want. Cotton, leather, denim, it doesn't matter. They can pick whatever color they want or design. And they have a little freedom, in how the final product looks. But no matter what materials they use, the construction has to follow the same instructions. If they don't follow the pattern, the seams won't line up, the sleeves won't fit, and the final shirt just won't work. Assuming they're making a shirt, I guess I just threw that in there. And that's what a pattern really is. It's a repeatable blueprint. It's a structure that tells you how something should be put together, regardless of what it's made of. And if you know how the pattern unfolds, you can look at a pile of fabric and already know what the finished product will be. You can even predict where the next stitch is supposed to go before the sewer even picks up the needle. It's truly fascinating when you really understand how patterns work, and that's why patterns matter. They're not just not just useless decorations. They're actually designs. They're the hidden instructions behind everything that exists. Patterns are, in my opinion, one of the most underrated realities in existence. Most people notice them, but I would argue that very few understand them. And here's the thing is, if you truly understand patterns, you can do two incredible things. One, you can predict the future, which everybody wants to be able to do that, right? The study of patterns and the study of the past helps you do that. And the second thing that they can help you do is understand the mysteries of God that are all around us. Because once you learn the pattern, you start to recognize the sewing lines in the fabric of reality itself. But here's the caveat. You can't just jump in and get it overnight and understand patterns overnight. Understanding patterns really takes a lot of front loading. People sometimes ask me, how do you see these things? How do you connect the dots that other people miss? And it's not because I just wanted to do this and picked it up and boom, now all of a sudden I'm an expert. It's because this is my life's work. I've spent decades studying patterns. I've studied world history, religious history, philosophy, science, mythologies, you name it. Every text I can find, I read it and I study it, and I want to get, better at this stuff all the time. I've studied virtually every major sacred book, the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Quran, the Pahlavi text, the Popol Vuh, and countless texts you've probably never even heard of, because I've always felt that religion is another piece of the same grand design. It's all the same story being told through different lenses. And the more I learn, the more that these patterns start really just leaping off the page. It's kind of like connect the dots drawings. You start doing a handful of dots and you don't really know what the image is yet, but somewhere along the way, all of a sudden, you've connected enough dots that the picture becomes clear. And every dot that you connect after that just makes the picture more clear. It's not going to change the picture at that point. you already see the picture, and at that point it's just refining it. So let's take an example. This is one of my favorite patterns I like to talk about. It's the allegory of the olive tree in the Book of Mormon, and it's in Jacob chapter 5, and in my opinion it's one of the most overlooked parables in Scripture. And kind of side note here, I think that Jacob 5 is by itself a chapter that proves that Joseph Smith didn't make it all up. There's no way that a young farm boy could have understood these ancient horticulture practices, and there's just so much in that chapter that he just literally couldn't have known. Very, very powerful chapter. I definitely recommend reading it. On its surface, it's the story of God, planting Israel and saving as much of Israel as possible. And when the tree starts to decay, he takes branches and he spreads them out, into other lands, and takes some of the foreign branches and, brings them and grafts them into the main tree. And there's lots of back and forth. And ultimately, in the end, all of the good fruit is gathered up and whatever's left is burned and destroyed. But if you look deeper, you actually find a biological pattern hiding there. The master of the vineyard brings in new branches, prunes and grafts and nourishes and ultimately harvests. And that's not just horticulture. It's the same process your digestive system follows every day. Everything you eat goes through the same exact process. You take something in, you break it down, you extract what's useful, you cast off what's waste, and your body actually, in this whole time, is your enzymes are moving things back and forth between the food and your body and the food. So it's actually really fascinating how well the human digestive tract overlays the allegory of the olive tree. And the ultimate idea is that you grow stronger from what you keep, right? And this is what I call the God pattern. It's a pattern I searched for years and years, and ultimately found it sitting right in front of me in the Book of Mormon. The pattern goes from intake to refinement to extraction and ultimately renewal. And that pattern repeats everywhere, in plants, in people, in civilizations, even in galaxies, from the micro to the macro. And it's interesting, modern physics actually has caught up to this idea. The universe itself has been proven to operate on quantum mechanics. And what is quantum mechanics, if not the study of repeating and merging patterns? Every particle, every field, every vibration in reality follows mathematical symmetries that that interfere and combine and collapse into new states. That's pattern language at the smallest possible scale. It means the same creative rhythm we see in the olive tree or in the human digestive tract is also written into the atoms of existence itself. Truly, truly fascinating. So when I say the God pattern is universal, I mean that literally. It's quantum, it's cosmic, it's divine code, repeating from micro to macro. And once you grasp it, patterns stop being poetry and start becoming actual experimental frameworks. So let's take an example that science can't yet explain, like a black hole. We really don't know what happens inside. So this is all obviously theoretical. But if we map the olive tree pattern onto it, it suddenly makes sense. The black hole draws in matter. That's ingestion. Then it breaks down matter under incredible pressure, which is digestion. It then extracts energy and ejects jets of refined material back into space. That's excretion and renewal. So maybe a black hole isn't a cosmic vacuum after all. Maybe it's actually part of the living metabolism of the universe. It's God's own digestive system converting death into new creation, and preparing future cosmic eggs for, new worlds to be formed. It's not random speculation. It's pattern-based reasoning, clearly still speculation, just, educated speculation, you might say. it gives you a framework, to test within, even what you can't observe directly, and the best part is that patterns always hold. So, we don't know what black holes really are or how they function, but it's very possible it could function exactly as I just said. And, maybe as science continues to learn more, we'll find out, hey, this is actually how it works, and there is truth in all these patterns. So let's shift away from the cosmic to the historical. There's another good example here, because sowing pattern plays out in history as well. And we know it's commonly said that history repeats, not because people copy each other, but because the patterns demand it. So take Gaius Marius of Rome. He was a populist general who rose to defend the Republic from corruption and invasion. He was beloved by the people, hated by the elites. He changed a whole bunch of stuff to, favor the people, basically. And he was ousted through political trickery, shenanigans, only to be called back later by popular demand, and to save the state. And once his job was done, he didn't stay long. He basically came back, fixed things, and then left for good. Then we have Napoleon, who followed the same cut and stitching. He, rose from obscurity. He defended the nation. He was exiled by corruption, and then he was brought back by the will of the people. In that short time he was back, he restored order. He changed the world again, and then he was gone again. But his brief return altered history forever. And if you look closely, if you follow me on X, I've said this quite frequently, that Donald Trump fits the same pattern almost line for line. A populist rises against a corrupt establishment, and he's undermined by, I guess we could call them procedural shenanigans. And he steps away, but the pattern said he'd return because he had to, and it's not fortune telling, it's not magic, it's pattern logic. And, I predicted he would lose the 2020 election and that he would come back again in 2024, and it all played out exactly as I predicted. But again, this isn't, I'm not receiving revelation. This isn't me prophesying, from God. It's just me studying patterns and following those patterns to their conclusion. And every time these guys come back, their return is temporary. The hero finishes the mission, departs, and the people have to govern themselves again. And then what follows is always a struggle, wars, tests, and a new cycle of refinement. And so that's, my prediction right now is that, Trump will maintain peace, at least some semblance of peace while he's in office. And then, after he leaves, all hell's going to break loose. And ultimately the same rhythm echoes the life of Jesus Christ. He was betrayed by corruption, condemned by foreign and domestic powers, crucified by deceit, and then after he died, he was gone for a few days, and then he returned, but not to rule forever again. He just redeemed and empowered his followers, and then he left again, leaving mankind to choose light or darkness until his next return. So we have different ages, different names, but it's all the same pattern. It's the pattern of descent and rejection and vindication and renewal. And we find this pattern everywhere. So, why are patterns important? Obviously because they're the fingerprints of God on the fabric of existence. They prove that creation isn't random. It was governed by law, by divine law, and that law manifests as a repeating structure. And it's actually really fascinating because the ancients knew this. That's why scripture speaks in symbols, why nature spirals, why history rhymes. They were all trying to describe the same thing, the divine blueprint behind everything. So when you understand patterns, you don't just gain information, you gain vision, right? In a way, you gain revelation. You start to see the stitches in the garment of reality. All creation follows the same rhythm: ingestion, breakdown, refinement, renewal, rinse and repeat. We could even look at tie it to the pride cycle, right? The pride cycle is kind of a similar thing. And that's what happens in your stomach, in a forest fire that clears land for new trees, in the rise and fall of nations, and the very cycle of life and death itself. It all follows this same pattern. It's just truly, truly fascinating. And even the atonement follows this law. Christ descended below all things. He took in the sins of the world. That's his ingestion. He was broken down through suffering. That's his refinement, and he overcame death and rose again. So that's renewal. So it all follows the same pattern, and it really does reflect the God pattern, as I call it, in its purest form. Every other pattern we see is basically just a smaller echo of the same eternal act, and it's in everything, no matter where you look. So if you want to understand patterns, that are all around you, you really, as I mentioned earlier, you have to front load your mind. You have to study deeply. You have to read widely. Don't limit yourself. Don't be like those who say, well, all truth is only found in the Bible and everything else blasphemy, so I'm not going to read any of it. Well, that's exactly what Satan wants you to say, because he doesn't want you to know these things. He doesn't want you to see the truth in all things around us. History and science and myth, it's, in my opinion, it's all raw material, and for you to absorb. And once you can see these patterns, you can even identify them in media and entertainment. I make posts a lot as I'm watching TV shows and movies. I'll be like, hey, that reflects this pattern, and I'll go and I'll post about it online. The more data that you feed your soul, the more clearly you'll recognize the stitches when you see them. Then, once you can see all of that, you stop seeing chaos and you start seeing design, very intentional and meticulous design all around us. You'll realize the universe isn't random machinery. It's a living organism, and we're part of its body. Just like our body has all these tiny cells that are all workers in the body. We are each workers in the larger biological organism of the world, which is, an organism of the universe. And it just keeps trickling upward from the micro to the macro. Our choices, our trials, our renewals, they're all tiny cycles within the grand cycle of God's own creation. So again, why are patterns important? Because they teach us to think like the master sower thinks. To see that every thread has a purpose, every cut has a reason, and every color has a place. And, once you recognize the pattern, you stop fearing the unknown. You stop asking, why is this happening? And you start asking, which part of the cycle am I in? Are we being cut right now? Then refinement's next. Are we in the fire? Then renewal's coming. And it gives you some hope, I guess, even in bad situations, that you can look forward to, positive things in the future. Patterns, they turn fear into faith, because, even decay is just preparation for resurrection, right? Even darkness is just the digestion before the dawn. So patterns are God's language written across the cosmos. They're very important, in my opinion. Very underrated. Most people don't care about them. But when you learn to read that language, you start to understand the heart of the Creator himself. Anyway, those are my thoughts for today. Patterns are definitely awesome. I study them all the time. If you want to know more about studying patterns, we can definitely have some conversations on that. Just drop some comments and we'll talk. Thank you guys, as usual, for watching these and for commenting. Just so you guys know, I don't really entertain hostile comments in the threads. I'll just block you. If you want to learn and grow together, then let's do it. But, I'm not here to pick fights. So, if that's your beef, you just want to come in and pick fights, take it somewhere else. I'll just block you. But, if you guys have any good ideas for some topics, drop them in the comments, and I'll do some research as well. So always thank God for everything he's done for me and continues to do for me, and helping me learn and grow, and bringing these things to you in a way that you can understand them. So this is always fun, and I'll talk to you guys next time.